In the bustling heart of Ottawa, where the Rideau Canal gleamed under a crisp autumn sun, Prime Minister Mark Carney stared at the headlines splashed across his desk. Carney loses IT as his approval ratings collapse, Canadians turn on him. The words burned like acid, a digital dagger thrust by the very people he'd sworn to serve. His hands trembled as he crumpled the newspaper, his once unshakable confidence fracturing like ice on a thawing river. How had it come to this? Just 2 years ago, he'd ridden into office on a wave of hope, promising economic revival, environmental stewardship, and unity in a divided nation. Now, polls showed his approval at a dismal 22%, and whispers of rebellion echoed from coast to coast. Mark's journey to the top had been anything but easy. Born in the rugged prairies of Alberta to a modest family of farmers, he'd watched his parents toil endlessly against droughts and market crashes. His father, a stoic man named Jack, had lost the family farm in the 80s recession, forcing them to relocate to Toronto. There, young Mark discovered a passion for economics, burying himself in books about global markets and policy reforms. He rose through the ranks, Bank of Canada, Bank of England, becoming a beacon for Canadians who dreamed of stability in an unstable world. But politics? That was a beast he tamed with charisma and vision, or so he thought. His wife, Elena, a dedicated environmental activist he'd met during his London days, was his anchor. With her flowing auburn hair and fierce green eyes, she embodied the passion he sometimes lacked. Their 3 children, teenage twins Mia and Liam, and little Sophie, kept him grounded. Yet, as the approval ratings plummeted, even home felt like a battlefield. "Dad, why do people hate you?" Sophie had asked innocently over breakfast, her wide eyes piercing his soul. Mark forced a smile, but inside, doubt gnawed at him. The collapse hadn't happened overnight. It started with the Green Energy Accord, a bold plan to transition Canada from fossil fuels to renewables. Mark envisioned wind farms dotting the landscapes, solar panels on every rooftop, and jobs flooding into struggling communities. But the implementation faltered. Delays in funding left Alberta's oil workers unemployed, their families scraping by on government aid that never seemed enough. Protests erupted in Calgary, signs reading, "Carney's Green Dream is our nightmare." Then came the inflation spike, global supply chains disrupted by wars abroad, and Mark's policies accused of exacerbating the pain. Groceries soared, housing became a luxury, and young families like those of his old friends back home felt abandoned. Enter Sarah Thompson, a single mother from Vancouver who'd become the unintended face of the resistance. Sarah worked 2 jobs as a nurse and a barista, her son Ethan battling asthma from the city's polluted air. She'd voted for Mark, believing in his promises of affordable healthcare and clean cities. But when hospital budgets were cut to fund the energy shift, Ethan's treatments became a monthly ordeal of waiting lists and denied claims. "This isn't leadership, it's betrayal," Sarah vented in a viral TikTok video, her voice cracking as tears streamed down her face. The video exploded, amassing millions of views overnight. Canadians from Halifax to Whitehorse shared their stories, farmers losing subsidies, students drowning in debt, Indigenous communities fighting for promised land rights that never materialized. Mark's inner circle cracked under the pressure. His chief of staff, Raj Patel, a sharp-minded immigrant from India who'd idolized Mark's rise, began questioning every decision. "Sir, the polls aren't lying. We're losing the middle class," Raj said during a late-night strategy session in the Prime Minister's office. Mark slammed his fist on the table, his face reddening. "I'm not losing it. We're building a future." But deep down, he knew Raj was right. The media dubbed it Carney's meltdown, capturing leaked footage of him yelling at aides during a cabinet meeting. Social media erupted with memes, caricatures of a once polished leader unraveling. As the storm intensified, Mark retreated to his family cottage on Georgian Bay, seeking solace in the whispering pines and lapping waves. Elena joined him, her presence a balm. "Mark, you've always been the fixer. But you can't fix a country if you're broken inside," she said, wrapping her arms around him. They talked for hours, reminiscing about their early days, protests against climate inaction, late-night debates over policy papers. It was Elena who reminded him of his roots, the boy who'd promised his father he'd make things right for families like theirs. Back in Ottawa, the turning point loomed. A national town hall was scheduled, broadcast live across the country. Mark's team urged caution, stick to the script, defend the policies. But as he stepped onto the stage, facing a sea of skeptical faces, something shifted. He saw Sarah in the audience, Ethan by her side, clutching an inhaler. Instead of reciting prepared lines, Mark set the microphone down and spoke from the heart. "Fellow Canadians, I've failed you," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "I came into this office with grand visions, but I lost sight of the people those visions were for. Families like Sarah's, struggling to breathe clean air while waiting for help that never comes. Workers in Alberta, whose livelihoods I uprooted without a proper bridge to the future. Indigenous leaders, whose voices I heard but didn't truly listen to." He paused, tears welling. "My approval ratings are in the tank because I deserve it. But I'm not done fighting, for you, for us." The confession sparked a firestorm, but not of anger, of raw, shared vulnerability. Sarah stood up, her own eyes misty. "Prime Minister, we don't want perfection. We want action." What followed was an unscripted dialogue. Mark listened as citizens poured out their pains, lost jobs, rising costs, fractured communities. He pledged immediate reforms, emergency aid for energy transition workers, healthcare boosts funded by corporate taxes, and a national reconciliation fund for Indigenous projects. The challenges didn't vanish overnight. Opposition parties howled for his resignation, labeling it a desperate ploy. Protests continued, but their tone softened, evolving into calls for collaboration rather than ousting. Mark faced his biggest personal hurdle, rebuilding trust within his family. One evening, as snow dusted the Ottawa streets, he sat with Mia and Liam. "I thought being strong meant never admitting weakness," he confessed. "But real strength is owning your mistakes." The twins, who distanced themselves amid the chaos, hugged him tightly. Sophie drew a picture of Super Dad fixing Canada, a child's hope reigniting his resolve. Relatable figures emerged as allies. Tom, a laid-off oil rig worker from Edmonton, joined a government retraining program for wind turbine maintenance. "Carney's not perfect, but he's trying," Tom shared in a follow-up interview, his weathered face breaking into a grin as he described his new job. In Toronto, Indigenous elder Maria Whitefeather collaborated with Elena on community-led environmental initiatives, turning promises into tangible solar installations on reserves. These stories humanized the turnaround, showing that change wasn't top-down but collective. As months passed, approval ratings inched upward, not to stratospheric heights, but to a respectable 45%. Mark's meltdown became a turning point, a lesson in humility. He revamped policies with public input, hosting monthly forums where ordinary Canadians shaped decisions. The Green Energy Accord evolved, balancing renewables with support for fossil fuel communities through just transition funds. Inflation eased with targeted subsidies, and healthcare wait times dropped as nurses like Sarah received bonuses and expanded staffing. Yet, the emotional depth of the saga lingered. Mark often reflected on that viral headline, now framed in his office as a reminder. "It wasn't about losing it," he'd say to Raj over coffee. "It was about finding myself again." Elena's activism flourished, inspiring a new generation, while the kids thrived, proud of a father who'd chosen vulnerability over vanity. In the end, Canada's story wasn't one of collapse but of resilience. Mark Carney, once on the brink, emerged stronger, proving that leaders are human, flawed, feeling, and capable of growth. The nation turned, not against him, but toward a shared future, where empathy bridged divides and challenges forged unity. And there you have it, folks, the raw, emotional roller coaster of a leader's fall and rise. If this story moved you, hit that like button to show your support, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring tales of real-life triumphs. Your engagement keeps us going. Let's build a community that turns challenges into change together.